because 7 years before it was Her Majesty's Prison, HMP. And then on the letter it says HMP, but it says Her Majesty's Pleasure to honour you with an MBE. And it was 7 years to the date that I got arrested for the last time.
OluwaJBeats.
Yes, my people, and we are back with another episode of the Money Ties podcast. It's your boy Clarence K, also known as CK Talks Money, and today we are blessed with another amazing guest. For the first time I'm recording, I'm not in London, but I'll let you guys guess where I am. We have Justice here. Justice, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me on the podcast. I think they're going to guess once they start hearing me talking and probably pick up the accent.
Literally. I might have to do a giveaway for whoever guesses the quickest, you know. But yeah, no, great to have you on.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Tell us a bit about you, like who you are, what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I am a business strategist and personal branding expert, mainly focused on working with female entrepreneurs and CEOs.
Nice.
So I help women specifically turn their passions into profit.
Yeah.
So it's all about packaging your skills, your experience and your expertise, what you already know, into a profitable business and building a successful and profitable personal brand. Now, never than before, people are focusing on personal brands rather than just a business brand, because ultimately, when you're buying a business, from a business, you're buying from people, and it's about that kind of, do your values align? Exactly. So that's kind of like what I do. I do some stuff with corporates as well in terms of personal branding in the workplace. I also help people start their own podcast and anything that increases their visibility in terms of what they're going to offer. Right. So that's kind of where I'm kind of focused at the moment. And depending on when this podcast episode is released, I'm also launching a physical product, which is a business planner. Yes. So it's a 12-month business planner for female entrepreneurs, whether you're starting, scaling, growing, restarting all over again. Mm-hmm. It's there to help you map out your whole year and actually kind of remove the overwhelm, increase the productivity, and help you to cultivate really good, healthy habits.
Perfect. And is that Dream
Plan launch,
right?
Yes.
And the link to that is in your bio, right?
Yes.
Cool. So if you go to Justice Instagram, which is Justice
Amaraya.
Yeah. I'll tag it all in the bottom of this video anyway. You'll see the Dream Plan launch link in there as well. So now thank you for that intro, Justice. That's great. What does your day-to-day look like?
Oh gosh, there's never a same day to day.
Yeah.
It was interesting because I did a podcast interview with Suzanne Dibble. She's a lawyer. Oh, cool. She's Richard Branson's former lawyer.
Oh, right.
And, you know, she says, oh, what does your day-to-day look like? And I says, well, actually, today's Wednesday. And Wednesday, I usually have the day off, alternate Wednesdays. So she's like, the day off from your business? It was like a bit of a shock, but it's because I've built my lifestyle and my business to work for me rather than my business, you know, adapting my business to suit my lifestyle. So typically my day actually starts at 10. And on a Monday, I meet with my VA. My VA is in the Philippines. So we meet on a Monday. We do like a Google Meet. We kind of discuss the priorities for the week. And we kind of communicate throughout the week through Slack and Trello, which is a project management tool. And everything else is different, but one day a week I will spend kind of focusing on my podcast. So it's in terms of content creation, recording and things like that. Another day of the week I will spend in terms of content creating for social media. And then I'll look at client work as well, so meetings with clients. But what I try and do is I try to batch my time. I don't like to feel that I'm running from one thing or one task to the other. I like to say focus on the one thing each day and really do that well. But I kind of typically work between the hours of 10 to 2:30 because my daughter's now started primary school. So those long nursery days are over. Congrats. You know, no school fee, nursery fees, but I've replaced them with school fees because my son started secondary school. But for me, it's very much about different things in different days. Sometimes I'll be, you know, going out on a photo shoot with a client for a brand like I was doing yesterday. Could be recording a podcast episode, could be speaking at an event, could be doing an event. But typically my day starts slowly. Well, I get up at 6:45, get the kids out, but then I kind of want to start my day where I don't really get into work until like 10 a.m.
Got you. Okay.
I'm not a 9 till 5 at all.
No, and to be honest, I thought that's probably the main pro of of doing your own thing, and that's what everyone's probably chasing. But I thought everyone had this misconception that doing your own thing means you get to relax and chill.
Part-time hours.
So talk to them about the hard work as well, Justice.
Oh gosh.
You've explained that really well, but I want them to see the real. What's your biggest challenge?
To be honest, it's I've been in business now for approximately 20 years.
Right. Okay.
So it's not like a overnight thing, and I'm still growing and still on that journey to what I call success, because success for everybody is different.
Yes.
But there's been times when I've had to close the business down. There's been times when I've focused on delivering really well, but not actually focused on the money, and not on the finances and not on the cash flow. And, I remember, I think it was about, 13 years ago, we had to literally do a midnight flint from our office. Literally, there was we went, scanned the card, and they were like, sorry, you ain't paid your rent this month. You need to go to the bank. When you pay your rent, then come back and we'll let you be in. And at this time, I was running a magazine, like an urban lifestyle magazine. It was the first of its kind in the city. But I was working with a lot of students. And so we had a big staff team. It was great. We had a big office. But, the outgoing bills with the wages of the designer and the admin was about £5,000 a month. Wow. And, we had some grants at first, but when the grants all dried up, we didn't have a plan. And, literally I was like, okay, well, my checkbooks, that was back then when you paid things with checks. And I was like, okay, if you let us back in the office, then we can get the checkbooks so we can go to the bank and get paid. But, there was no money in the bank. So literally they says, right, we're going to activate your cards for 24 hours. And then if you're not paying, then, you won't get access to your office and stuff. So literally that night, me and my friend, like I told everybody, the business is not working out, and everybody just what you could say, dipped. They just disappeared. Dispersed. They went back their merry way and went on to the next opportunity. Then her and I, that night, we literally drove back to the office. It was a good job I was only living 5 minutes away. It was in the city centre of Birmingham. And we literally spent the night packing up and doing about 20 trips in the car. And we just packed up the whole office. Boy. Took the computers. It was mainly the computers. We had to leave the desk. We had these beautiful glass desks. There was about 8 glass desks. We had a sofa. Because sometimes when we hitting a publishing deadline, we'd sleep in the office till late. We had a microwave. And I had to make sure I got my iMac. I had about 4 PCs. And it was all my documents and my USBs and all my paperwork is what I really needed. All my folders and files. And literally we never looked back, because that was it. But that was the biggest low in business. It's just a very humbling experience, because you feel like you failed. But it was a time when 2008, 2009, when we was going into a recession, and the publishing industry was one of the worst hit. But we didn't realise it until we were in it.
Until you were part of it.
Until we was part of it. And some of the biggest publications, that's why you see now they're no longer existed. They're online. And that's where a lot of publications moved online. And some of them just closed their doors for good and were like, no, we can't. It says, well, if they've got £1 million budgets and we've got a £0 budget, then let's just kind of just accept and move on.
Accept your fate.
And my friend was like, it's cool. He was like, we work from home, we'll just work from your apartment. And he goes, this is what happens. Maybe it's I know that with women as well, we sometimes get caught up in worrying about what other people are thinking and the perception, because we're usually given more of a hard time. If we're seen as quite assertive, or the alpha female, we're bossy, or the BITCH. So it was a bit of that. But at the same time, I just felt like I let down a lot of people and had to make my first employee redundant as well. So it was a shock to the system. So it hasn't all been
it's not all roses.
Nah, not at all. Not at all.
And you mentioned the planning that you put in place, and that maybe you didn't plan for something like that to happen. To be fair, I don't think anyone could have planned for that anyway. But would you say that stories or times like that shapes your vision for the planner that you're making now to give to businesses?
Definitely. The planner that I'm making now is basically a combination of all the different tools that I've started to use in my own business and my own life. And then I started giving them away for free. So in 2015, 16, I created this kind of business and lifestyle planner, which was how do you reflect on the year that you've had? Close down, this didn't work out. Okay, what lesson did I learn? Now let's look forward to the future and plan out what you're going to do for the next year. And it started as of 19 pages, and then the next year it grew to about 40-something pages. And then it was just like a digital download I used to give away for free. The reason why I've created a planner is all tools that I used, and I
yeah.
kind of brought them all together and combined them. So it wasn't about something that I just kind of thought, oh, this looks good, but it's things that I was using anyway. And people coming to me and saying, well, hold on, at that time I didn't have my daughter. It was very much, you got your son,
Right. Yeah.
you're doing full time, you seem to be everywhere, you're speaking at this event, you're on the train to London, you're in Derby.
Yeah.
Like, how are you doing all
you
this
balancing
stuff?
it all? Yeah, yeah.
And it's just you and your son. It's not like you've got somebody else there
Got
who's
you.
kind of helping and supporting.
Yeah.
And a lot of it came to planning, forward planning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I combined the tools together. And then what I did is I was giving them away for free from 2015.
Right.
So it was like an annual kind of planner, goal setting planner.
Cool.
And then it went from 20 pages to 40 pages to 50 pages. And then last year it was like over 100 pages. But I had this dream to start the planner a few years ago, and I just kept procrastinating. I said, you know what, even if I just sell 100, let me just get the planner kind of out there to the world, because it's still 100 people that I'm going to help. And people like saying, you got any plans to create a physical planner? But I've created like little notepads, daily notepads that I also give away to my clients. I haven't actually even started selling them yet. I just give them to my clients. Goal action planning kind of notepads and weekly plans, so you can just put it on your desk. And kind of,
as the day goes.
So I kind of combine digital and physical. Nothing still beats writing on a piece of paper.
Yeah, of course.
But also having the digital kind of tools and the project management and the diary and the scheduling and all that as well.
That's really good. That's really good. And you speak about the female entrepreneurs that you work with. What's your passion for that? Where does that come from? And why female entrepreneurs?
The reason why, I always say to people, when you're starting a business, you need to understand your audience. You need to understand their pains, their challenges, their frustrations, or their aspirations and their desires. Now, for me, I knew that how men think is different to how women think.
Of course,
And for me, I always wanted to create a business and a service for the justice 10 years ago.
Okay.
I didn't have that support. And when I started in my business 15, 20 years ago, there was a visible lack of female role models in business.
Okay.
Remember, we're talking about an era, without me sounding like a prehistoric dinosaur, or my son would say born in the Victorian days. We're talking about an era pre-social media. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. So for you to kind of connect with people, you'd have to either see them on TV, hear them on the radio, or read about them in the papers.
Magazines.
And as young people, we weren't picking up the newspapers to read. We would get a flyer, go to an event and things like that and so forth, or listen to pirate radio, community radio station and stuff like that. So for me, unless I was out at meetings, I wouldn't see visible role models. So naturally, there was a group of us as young people that kind of came up together in Birmingham. Some women, some men, and we kind of, there was about 8 or 9 of us, and we kind of gone on to do different things, and we're still all in like business or social entrepreneurship now. But there was no visible role models. And I remember going to see a business advisor, and they sent me to see this man. And he was in his 60s, and he was this white middle-class man, and I explained to him what I wanted to do. And he says, that doesn't sound like a business, that sounds like a charity. And I said, it's not, it's a social enterprise. A social enterprise is X, Y, and Z. And he's sitting there, and I'm teaching him, and I'm thinking, why am I at 24 teaching this business advisor when he's supposed to be giving me advice?
Exactly.
So I thought, what about all the other young people coming up and they wanting to get support and then hitting that kind of brick wall?
And if they meet him, they're not going to learn
they're going to just be like, you know what,
exactly.
forget it, can't be bothered. So for me, I didn't actually start off working with women. I was a young person supporting other young people. It was my peers. And then as I grew older and then I had my first child, the dynamics changed, my priorities changed, my values shifted. And my audience changed as well, because now I'm a mum and I'm being visible. So people now, other mums are now coming my way and they're saying, oh, okay. And I'm in my 30s. It's a whole new market. And then even when people say, oh, can you come and do some work with young people? There came a point when I did a contract and I just felt like that disconnect of lack of confidence. But it was like, you know what? I need to hand the baton to another young person now to work with these young people. Like, let me stick to my age group. Because I can't relate to the needs of these young people anymore. It's a different era, it's a different time. And these are what I call Generation Tech. They're growing up with technology and things like that, and they communicate in different ways. Their priorities are different, Gen Z. So for me, that's how I moved towards women and realised there was a gap, that women weren't getting the support that they needed. And we have different challenges to men when it comes to starting a business. Although that we were, we had the tools to start the business. It was about the sustainability. It was about the access to finance. It was about the mindset and the confidence. But also as well, childcare is a big barrier for women.
Exactly.
And we have one of the highest rates of childcare in Western Europe. So, you know, you're paying a mortgage and a half just to send your children.
So that's really
so, you know, these were some of the unique challenges that women had, and there wasn't anything that was meeting that need. So I decided, you know, don't complain about something, create a solution.
Yeah. That's amazing. Were you ever a project manager, by the way?
How did you know?
It sounds, everything you say sounds very project
manager.
This is the issue, solution, process, planning.
Do you know?
It's giving Prince 2. You know?
Do you know what was funny? I wasn't actually a qualified project manager. What happened was there came a period when I was living literally just a stone's throw away from here. We're in the jewellery quarter in Birmingham. Yeah. And if anybody knows the jewellery court, it's a very creative, it's got its history. We actually, I think we were responsible for 40% of the whole of the jewellery that's created in the UK.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so...
I did see a long road with loads of jewellery and gold shops.
Yeah, so the jewellery court is historically known for that. And then down the road, you've got coffin works.
Okay.
Because that's where they make all the coffins for the royal families over the years and things like that. So it's got a lot of history. And I used to live around the corner, but then there came a point when my son was due to start school, and I had to relocate out of the area because there's no like good primary schools or whatever around for him to get into. And then I went back to, this opportunity came up for me to get a job, and I'd already been self-employed for so long, and I was like, the thought of going to the job gives me anxiety. It's that restriction of, you know, somebody telling you what to do, having to do stuff that you not necessarily want to do. And it's not about laziness, because actually I was very hardworking and working very long days, but I needed flexibility, especially with my child.
Of course, yeah.
But an opportunity came up at Birmingham City Council, and it was an enterprise support officer. And it was about providing enterprise support, which was what I was already doing, to the most disadvantaged wards in the city. So for me, it was coming from the same background of my youth community, working with inner city young people. So for me to do that, you know, was great. And out of the 4 of us that they recruited, the manager was like, we think you should be the lead for young people. I think I was the youngest one out of everybody anyway.
So it made sense.
So I says, okay, no problem. I'll do that. And I had a lot of autonomy in my job. But part of that, they offered us some training, and it was Prince 2.
Prince 2, yeah.
And I was doing this, and I remember getting that big textbook and looking at it, and I was like, oh my goodness me. And I was like, it just didn't gel, but I retain information really easily. So I went on the workshops, did the training, and I passed, and I got it.
Nice.
But I think it's there unconsciously in the back of my head,
Like,
but I don't draw on this.
somewhere.
I couldn't tell you any of the terms today,
course,
but it probably comes out in the way that I do what I do now.
Cool.
But because I have kids, I know that I have limited time. I'm very focused on how I spend the time. So I always think in a logical way, although I'm quite creative.
Okay. And what you do now, would you say you always knew that's what you wanted to do?
No.
Oh, right.
No, because when I started off, you know, as a child, my dad said I was going to be a lawyer.
Okay.
And that's what I
Parents always have their own idea.
So he's like, you're going to study law, you're going to be a doctor. And then, you know, go to school and you find out what you need to do. Because at the time, no internet. So it was careers. There was not even no social media.
Library.
There was no internet. So that's taking you way back in the early 90s. And we had a careers advisor.
Okay.
So everyone used to have an appointment with the careers advisor in year 9, and they'd say, what do you want to do? And then in year 10, you'd go on your work experience, your 2 weeks work experience. And I said, I want to do law. So I was like, you have to write to these law firms. So literally write a letter by hand, put it in an envelope. Post it out, and then they would write back to you and say whether or not, this is what I'm telling you,
literally.
whether or not that you'd get the opportunity. And no one accepted me. And then there was like, we've got some vacancies. The school did, you can work in a chemist. But it was literally like
2 weeks.
I thought, okay, fine. So I was sent to work in a chemist, and it was literally like stocking shelves and using that big thing to clean the floors and stuff. But then obviously what happened was then I went to college, I passed all my GCSEs, went to college, did 4 A-levels, left home, got that freedom, got caught up in some nonsense, and then ended up spending a short time in prison when I was 21. So that kind of was like, on release, was like, okay, well, you're not gonna quite go down the law route no more with the criminal record.
Free justice, you know.
And then
what?
And then
that hit me, boy. I was like, wow.
So that's the thing, because a lot of people, and that shows you about personal branding, because
if you'd have
Googled me 7 or 8 years ago, you'd see all that in the press. And then now, because of how my personal brand is shifted and aligned, you're going to have to go to the second or third page of Google to see those things. So, you know, for me, at that time, I got into youth and community work. And I worked with this organisation, helped them to get funded, built them up, and then decided that I needed to go and do my own thing because I was quite restricted and I had kind of this dream of what I wanted to build. That's when I went to see that business advisor who told me nonsense. And then when I did my own thing by myself and kind of built it up, and then within the first year built it to a 6-figure social enterprise and managed to secure funding. But then at that time I was working with the Barrow Cadbury Trust, who funded me, but they went that extra mile and says, look, we don't want to just give you the money, we want to get you exposure and get you out there. Remember, again, pre-social media, so this was 2005 2006 to 2008. And they were like, we partnered with a PR company in London. So we want to get your story out there and in the press. So I got into The Guardian and in the Times and Daily Express.
They just did that off their own.
Yeah, because there was a story, because it was like this young woman from who never grew up in the inner city, who then got into trouble, turned her life around, started helping other young people that were involved in gangs and coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, who's now built this organisation, worked with hundreds of young people, out here campaigning, wasn't getting paid. And so that was where my personal brand actually started, but I didn't realise it was called personal branding or anything.
And it's crazy because it's like you didn't sit there and say, this is what I want my brand to look like. Your life painted it for you. It's like your life experiences chose your personal brand for you, you know, And I always say to people, like, when you're building a personal brand, you've got to think about your personal brand foundations, which is what's your why. So I was clear on my why, because it was about, we've got young people who are dying, being killed. The system isn't really helping us. They're not giving the young people the opportunities. So let's create our own opportunities for young people, our own programs. And that's when I birthed my first enterprise program. So I started delivering startup support back in the mid 2000s. Went back to college, did my teachers training, learned how to write programs, and that's when the Barrow Cadbury came on trust. And then I always say, what do you want to be known for? So what do you want to be the go-to expert for? You already know that, so for example, yours about finance and money, but it could be within a specific area. So I was the go-to expert for one, working with young people, but specifically around enterprise and creativity. So I had this company called Inner City Creative Media Group that I set up, and that's where I had my magazine. We did fashion shows. We'd provide work experience. We would do, you know, theatre productions and, you know, music shows. And I got a contract with MTV Base, and I ran I Love Live in Birmingham, live music shows and things like that. So I was kind of, because I've got this side that I just love, like, creativity and stuff like that. And bringing that together with business. And so I already had the why, and I was already the go-to expert. So when you're very clear on that and you're visible, then people will come to you, the press will come to you, then they want someone to speak about something. This was at the time when, you know, it was about young people being involved in gangs and a lot of the negative stuff. So they always wanted to have another angle of what okay, well, who's doing something about it? Change it,
And we had lots of community leaders back then, but it was us as young people whose voices really needed to be heard.
Because that's the insides. That's the inside.
Yeah, so I was quite vocal. I wasn't media trained. You know, I remember, you know, they invited me to a conference with the House of Commons, and I can't remember who it was at the time. That was, I think it was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and they phoned me up and goes, "Oh, Justice, we noticed you wasn't available. This is Daily Express here." I was pulling petrol in my car. I remember
this is the Daily Express.
And I was like, you know, he wasn't at the conference today, and we expected to see you because you're somebody in Birmingham doing stuff. And I was like, oh, you know, they just had a knee-jerk reaction to, you know, the shootings that happened. They don't really care about young people. I'm not going to waste my time being like a, you know what I mean, like a little public,
like a face of
puppet for your campaign.
Exactly,
Anyway, I'm at the petrol station. I gotta go, and I hung up, and then they end up quoting me on the front page of the paper. But back then I didn't. I'll just say it how it is, kind of thing. I was very authentic in my approach, and I think that's another thing as well. When you're building your personal brand, you have to be authentic. 100%. Don't try and. Okay, I understand when people say fake it till they make it, but in terms of who you are and how you present yourself, Just be yourself.
Be who you
Some
are.
people are going to like
Yeah.
you. Some people are not going to like you. Some people are going to listen to this podcast. I'm like, oh, I hate her accent.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
No,
I
it's
see
true.
always online Birmingham, they're always slewing
All
Birmingham
that social media
accent
stuff.
on like Shaper and things like
Yeah.
that. But, you know, you have to just be true to who you are, and
Exactly.
you will repel the people who are not meant for you, and you will attract the people who are meant for you as well.
100%. And so that is Justice Williams, a lot of the history. Let's talk Justice Williams MBE.
Okay.
So how did that come about?
So I'll be honest, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. And don't let that go over your head. This is
Yeah.
MBE, you know. Guys, listen.
So I would say, to be honest,
Yeah.
when that whole era,
Yeah.
what I spoke about and being in the press and in the media, I remember
Yeah.
there was no social, and internet was limited in terms of Google
course,
to find
yeah.
and search for people, right?
Of course, yeah.
So we were communicating, and if you were building a personal brand, we were communicating via the mainstream media. So the difference with today is that anyone can build a following online and be considered an influencer or a public figure
course, yeah.
or a successful personal brand. But back then, you would get checked because journalists weren't going to feature you if you weren't credible or if you didn't know your stuff, because
Okay,
obviously it's
right.
going out into the print press.
Yeah.
So they'd know that they'd have to obviously verify you are who you are and you do what you do, which you don't do that with social media. You can buy
Anyone,
followers.
you can be who you want.
You can be who you want.
It's weird.
So for that reason, I was very visible.
Yeah.
I was young and I was consistent. So I was out there consistently. We had the riots in 2004 or 2005 in Birmingham. Myself and, you know, another organisation who's still doing great work today, First Class Youth Network, First Class Youth Foundation. We were out in the streets as volunteers in the midst of these riots, which was like race riots as they would dub them. And things were burning literally in the inner cities. They were setting things on fire. People were getting stabbed and killed and all sorts. And we were just trying to get all the young people off the streets. And I remember the BBC and Sky News approaching me. They were out there and like, justice, justice, justice. It's like I was clearly recognised. So we'd always be giving commentary. So people would reach out to me because I was visibly in the press.
Got you.
And I was consistently doing the work that I was doing. I'd worked with every agency. So back then there was an agency called Government Office West Midlands, which was like the localised version of the government.
Got you. Okay.
So every kind of region had a local government office. I was working with West Midlands Police. I was working with Birmingham City Council, Youth Services, Mental Health Trust, NHS. So I was very well kind of known.
Yeah.
So it's like people know me, but I don't necessarily know them. I'm just getting on doing my work with young people in my little kind of corner. And then I remember 7 years after me starting the work that I did, I got a letter from the Prime Minister saying, you've been nominated for an MBE. Do you accept or do you decline? What would you like to do? And at that time, it was quite interesting because it was shortly around the time when I was kind of questioning what I was doing with the magazine. We'd gone into that recession. And I was like, boy, maybe it's time to go and get the day job because you've come this far, but did you come this far to only come this far?
Right then.
So I sat there and I remember when I got that, it was like, I said, God, send me a sign that I'm on the right track. It's not about the money. Obviously, I want to be able to pay my bills, but show me that my work is making a difference.
Exactly.
And then I got that letter. And obviously at that time, I think we just had Facebook, I think Twitter. And for me, it was just like, I'm a young person, I'm in my 20s. And it was kind of unheard of that a black young person from Birmingham was getting recognised. And it was more about what could this do for the work I was doing. I wasn't even like, oh my gosh, I'm going to meet the Queen. It was more a case of, okay, let me think about this first. Do I want to accept? Do I want to decline? But actually, that's going to create a bigger platform. And unfortunately, due to the colour of my skin and the fact that I'm a female and that I was young, those things all stood against me. But then the narrative changed when people looked at you and was like, oh, MBE. And then they treated you differently and certain doors would open. And for me, it wasn't about being on the platform. It was about being that platform for others. Because a lot of people get success or what they deem to be success and become like a gatekeeper. And they're like, you know what, I don't want to let nobody else in because if I let them in...
maybe I won't eat the same because of someone else.
I'm going to eat half a plate instead of having my full meal.
Exactly.
And so for me, it was never about that because what I was doing wasn't about the money. I wasn't making any money. Do you know what I mean? I was literally living a very humble life. Like I used to say to people, if it's a good day, if it's an okay day, I'm going to get tea and toast. If it's a great day, I can have a boiled egg as well.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm saying. When I say hard times, it was graft. It was about humble, and we was grafting. It was about, not about us, it was about the impact. And for me, it was more a case of where I'd come from 7 years before to where I was 7 years later, you know, because 7 years before it was Her Majesty's Prison, HMP. And then on the letter it says HMP, but it says Her Majesty's Pleasure to honour you with an MBE. And it was 7 years to the date that I got arrested for the last time and to the date that I stood at Buckingham Palace, which was the 5th of November.
I've got to do round of, I don't want to mess up the mic, but I have to round of applause that.
And
that
to me, I believe in like 7 and the biblical things of the number of completion. So for me, and you know, if you haven't read like Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, I knew that was that tipping point, and I had to kind of take everything for what it was worth. So for me, it wasn't even about anything else, but what could this do for the young people in the inner city that felt there was no hope?
Yeah, because it's no longer just about you now.
Yeah, straight. And it's about my work, because it was an MBE for services to young people in Birmingham.
There you go,
You know, and in all honesty, that was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
So for some people that meet me, it's fresh. It's like, oh my gosh, it's new. Yeah. But for, you know, people who have known me for this long time, and even for myself, it's kind of like, you know, someone says to me, like, I remember my friend was like saying, oh my gosh, if I had an MBE or Queen's Honours, I'd be getting this, I'd be rich, I'd be doing all this stuff. And I'm like, that's not, you don't apply for it. Yeah. It's something that somebody nominates you for. Because I didn't even realise that. I was thinking like, how did I get this? Why me? And imposter syndrome. And then when I did some research, and it says, well, basically, you know, somebody will nominate you, and then it has to go through somebody credible. So it has to go through local authority or the police or a MP or a councillor or a judge or somebody who can verify that, someone of good standing, who they'd say, like people who sign your passport. Oh, okay, that they can write a reference to say that you're doing the work that you do. Right. And obviously they'll look in the press and things like that. And it's a process that can take up to 18 months. Wow. There's actually a whole committee, and then they choose who gets. And
you weren't even aware.
I wasn't aware of nothing. It's like a, because people kept asking me like, who nominated you, and I says I have no clue till this day. No one has come forward and said it was me.
It might not even be someone you know. It might just be someone who just knows who you are.
Yeah, I think it'd have to be someone I knew that knows me a bit about the work I was doing, and then obviously somebody who could then verify in a kind of like a strategic kind of a public figure. But I till this day I don't know who. But I think things have moved on now. So even back then, like on I phoned my mum, I was like, oh mum, I was a bit confused. Like, I've been nominated for this MBE, and she's like, oh my gosh, wonderful, I'm gonna meet the Queen and get her, you know, that generation of. And then she hung up the phone. There weren't no congrats or nothing. She hung up the phone, and I was like, okay, cool. And I obviously spoke to my dad, and he was like, boy, sir, because you know, bonfire upon Babylon. So, and that's a quite honest conversation that you need to have, because unfortunately, you know, the British Empire comes with, you know, a whole history that is not a positive one. Yeah, and so at that point in time, I had a conversation with him, and he was very open, and he expressed his feelings, and then I expressed mine. And I said, you know what? The past is a place of reference, but not a place of residency. I can't live there. And it's not to negate, and I could never even sit here and say that that's good, or what it represents, even having an MBE, what it represents, especially today in 2022. But back then, I said, this is just about creating a platform and opening the doors, and how much lives that we can save and change through the work that I'm going to do, you know? And then I remember going to Buckingham Palace, and my friend, one of my best friends, he came along, my mum, my sister, and I'd done a bit with the press beforehand. And then I didn't realise that he'd arranged with the BBC to get the footage when I was getting my MBE. The BBC had been there filming, and then they'd sent it to the BBC. They put this whole news piece together, and when I was on the train coming back from London, obviously Facebook was our platform of choice, because you know, that's where we were hanging out. There was no Instagram or TikTok, and my phone kept going ping, 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 and I was like, what's all this ping, ping, ping? And I looked at my phone, and it just said, oh, you've got 200 and something comments and 500 likes, and I was thinking, on what? Kind of thing. And he'd got the footage. It'd gone and aired on the TV. He'd got the footage, because he was all good in tech and stuff, in editing. Put it up on Facebook, and so just left Buckingham Palace with my friend, can't believe, from HMP to MBE, and put the news clippage. It was on BBC News, Midlands Today, and I'd shared it. And Everybody was commenting and I was like, oh my gosh, because up until that point, you're not allowed. Up until the point of you getting it, you can't publicly announce. But I came out in the June honours and then I went to Buckingham Palace in November, but I don't even think I even announced it. It was like, to me, it was nothing like, okay, thanks.
Crazy.
And that just literally was it. But can I have some money funding to help these young people? So a lot of those things was, okay, thanks. But it wasn't something like, oh my gosh. It was like, okay, thanks. And that was it really. So that was a bit of that journey.
Yeah, and with what you do on the money side, because of course the funding is usually applied for when you're doing, it's like a community
grants.
Grants, for example, let's say. Would you say that the MBE in itself alone has influenced the decisions for you to be able to get? It hasn't.
No. And this is the misconception. A lot of people feel like you made it, but no, because people already feel that you're at a certain level, so you don't need help. So it has a negative, it has the opposite effect.
All right, then.
And for a year, I was invited to speak at all these schools. No one wants to pay because you're supposed to go and inspire and give inspirational talks. But then when you're doing it full time, how does the rent get paid? How do you eat? Because they feel that you're at a certain level.
She doesn't need the money. She's
but you need to realise that there's people that have dinner ladies for 30 years and they're getting MBEs as well.
Oh.
Because of their service to their community.
Okay, I didn't know that.
All walks of life. It's not just people who are like at the very top of their career and they're, solving world hunger and, advocating for world peace. There's people who, it's about service. So it's about how have you been of service to others. So it's not about your personal success, it's about how you've been of service. So a lot of people who were doing voluntary work were getting recognised. So a lot of my work was 7 years of voluntary work. I would probably earn during that 7 years about £15,000. I literally survived on full-time benefits. And I was doing a voluntary work full time, morning, noon, and sometimes out on the streets in the night.
Image of, oh no.
Yeah, you made it and you're living the best life. Yeah. And to be honest, after that point, I actually didn't apply for any more funding.
Okay.
I literally had at that point then, literally I think a couple months later, I got pregnant with my first child, and then the next year, I said, I'm taking some time off. And I literally at that point took a break. And that's when my business transitioned.
Got you. No, amazing. And on that business front, so let's dive a bit into the money side of things now. So if you were to grade your, let's call it a relationship with money on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being I have a great relationship with money, 0 being it's shocking, where would you put yours?
I would say 7, but it used to be a 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at the times where it was a 2, would you say that was driven by experience or how you were taught or lack of teaching, or where would you say you were at that time?
I think it was a bit of both. I think culturally, remember that as Black people, Windrush generation coming to the UK, what a lot of people forget to realise that we're already behind when it comes to generational wealth, because we're in an era where we weren't even allowed to buy houses. So when a lot of people now, I grew up in a predominantly white area, a lot of my friends were middle class, they bought homes. One of my friends' dad owned a hotel, and so this was a lifestyle for them. It was normal. We were a working class family that had grown up in the inner cities when I was up to the age of 4 and moved to the suburbs.
Got you.
And we were in a council house, which my dad ended up being able to buy and sell and then invest overseas and build his multi-million-pound property empire. However, growing up, it was a case I would see certain things, but we didn't talk about money. And my dad, from his faith background, was very much like, don't be money hungry, and money is the root of all evil, and bonfire upon Babylon. And no designers, that's of the devil. You know what I mean? The Nike signs come from Greek and paganism. So it was very much that. Guess what? You live a humble life and you work hard. But I was that child when my dad used to send me to the post office every week, and he'd have his water plan and have his bills he'd paid, and I'd go to the post office and queue up and I'd be paying the bills and everything. He was never late on a bill. He wouldn't take out no credit. He didn't believe in credit.
Got you.
Yeah, he didn't believe in debt. So he would always, he's an entrepreneur. He financed his way through life himself. He bootstrapped his way. Even when he bought the first house, he didn't need a deposit. He got the money and he paid whatever 20, 30 grand and paid for the house outright because ex-council house. He was a builder.
Okay.
And he managed to say, right, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Knock off another 70 grand off the house. Yeah. And then he bought it that way. And then that house value went from what he bought for probably 30, 40 grand to now selling it at £250,000. Yeah, but so I saw the things, I would study myself, but he wasn't sitting there saying, right, this is what you need to do, because I think he was just going through life figuring it out, but he would always say, listen, don't get into debt. But they wouldn't explain what is debt. Yeah. Because he doesn't access debt, he doesn't access finance, so how is he going to explain to me about loans and
statements rather than teaching
and then things, okay, you go to the post office, you pay the bills, but where's the teaching about the importance of why you should pay your bills on time? We didn't know nothing about credit reports or credit history. So when I turned 18, I moved out by myself, I got my first flat, needed a car because I'd passed my test at 17. I'd actually saved. My first job was actually a paper round. Okay. Back in the days, you could have a paper round. It was safe to send your kids to push papers through doors at 7 in the morning in the dark. You know, and you'd earn like £12, £15 a week. Yeah. And then the corner shop that was in the close where we lived, the lady in there gave me a job, and I was working 6 till 10 in the evenings after school. This is when I was at secondary school, and she'd give me £10 a shift. So I was getting paid £2.50 an hour, and that was back in the 90s. Yeah. So it was good money back then. And so that's money I saved and bought my first car for like 600 and something pounds. When I passed my test, I paid for my driving lessons myself. I think when I came about 14, 15, my dad was like, you know, you need to start, you're working now. When you need your toiletries, you need your this, that, the other, you need to pay for them yourself. Yeah, but we grew up where, you know, we weren't getting, you know, 6 kids in the house. My mum was a seamstress and a tailor, so it was nice when we'd go places and she'd make us custom clothes and stuff. But now when you're going to college with handmade clothes, it's a different ball game, and people want to bully you and look at funny. You. So for me, it was like, now I want all these other stuff. And we never used to have name brand shoes. We used to wear like shoes that you'd get like from now what we call Sports Direct, those name brand ones, or Dykeman shoes and you know, Mercury and them type of brands. And Fila wasn't that popular back in the days neither. But like people would tease you and be like, oh, you know, you got all these, you ain't got no name brand stuff. So there was a desire to obviously want to fit in with my peers. But then after I had that car, then I wanted to get a new car because that kind of car broke down. It was old, it was second hand. And then I found out, oh, you can get car credit. Oh, how does this work? So I went to find about car finance, and they were like, oh, you haven't got good credit. So you got poor credit, so you have to go and get the poor credit car finance where it's that the interest is high. Interest rate, But I didn't know that I didn't have good credit is because I had a thin credit file, because which I know now, which means because I didn't have anything out on credit.
So there's no reason for it to go up.
So therefore you're going to have poor credit. So you have to build your credit history. And so I took out this car on car finance. So the car could have been like £4,000. But I'm going to end up paying £9,500. And then the payments are like £170 a month. And then at that time, I was bouncing from job to job because I think that's when the entrepreneurial traits was coming out. I was like, these jobs, I'd turn up a day for a job and was like, I can't do this job anymore, and not show up the next day. So I was always on the agency, and then go another job, may last a week, then go on another job. So back in the day, I wasn't really taught about, you know, the fundamentals and stuff. Like, we've got a lot of financial education now.
Of course.
And I think I've learned now through YouTube, but also as well, you know, there's people like yourself and other people who are out there who are actually sharing financial knowledge. And, you know, like attracts like. When you see somebody who looks like you giving that information, you trust
and that's that information. The biggest thing about having social media and doing something with it. You know, it even goes through to what you do. If there's a young lady, 18 years old now, doesn't know what to do, and she sees your page, it turns into, wow, that could be me. Yes. You know, not to replicate, but there's a path
it's
that
possible.
I can take. It's possible.
Yeah.
You know, so it makes a big difference. And would you say that experience at home with your father, how was that impacted how you speak to your kids about money? If you speak to your kids about money? Yeah,
I do. I mean, my daughter, she's 5, and it's funny because this morning we went, just before school, there's like a coffee shop, Carluccio's, like a posh Italian coffee, and she's like, oh, can I have a little hot chocolate this morning before school? She's 5. And then I says, not today, because I said I haven't brought my card out with me. So that's my excuse when I say to her, you're not getting anything right now. And she goes, Mummy, do you have any money to buy? Is it because you got no money? Are you broke? But you know what it is? It's because my 11-year-old, he runs them jokes and she picks it up. So if he says to me, I want a new PlayStation, says I ain't got no money for no PlayStation. Yeah. So I just end the conversation. I don't need to explain to you why you're not getting a PlayStation. So also, there's no money, there's not in the budget. It's not in the budget. And you go, are you broke? Yeah, no and then you laugh and he thinks it's a joke, but I think you're watching too much TikTok videos. And I says
Most definitely.
And he's like, I'm only joking, Mummy, I'm only joking. Yeah. I says, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
You know what I'm saying? You're going,
but
this is upstairs.
But for me now, from a younger age, I remember him wanting new toys because he was quite, I wouldn't say spoiled, but it was me and my son. I was making good money being self-employed. We had a nice house in Harborne. But for me, my values may be different to the average person. So I didn't value having a car. I remember selling my car so I could get a deposit to get this house. And since then, I didn't have a car because I'd moved into Harborne. It's a middle-class, affluent area in Birmingham, which is still kind of labelled a village, but everything's on your doorstep. Banks, supermarkets, so schools, swimming pool, parks. Literally, we lived on the road of the school. So I worked from home. And then when I would work out of town, I would just catch an Uber and catch a train and jump on a train. So for me, having a car was it's just sitting there. So I sold the car because when I moved to the jewellery quarter, you don't get free parking because it's quite a built up area. You have to get a permit to park for the year. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Get rid of the car, get the house. And we catch the train and we catch the bus and whatever. I had no problem. Like people would see me and go, Justice, are you Justice Williams? You're on the bus. Like, what happened?
And it's just that whole image of someone is a figure, so they're meant to have all these things.
Definitely.
And this is an issue for me.
But when it comes to money, you have to understand what is it that you truly value. Like, I don't value a Birkin bag. I don't value a designer handbag. I may one day buy a bag for £800 or £900. I can't see it right now. I don't value designer shoes. I like clothes and I like shoes, but I like to shop at the top end of the high street and sometimes at the bottom end of the high street. So I mix the Primark, the Primani with Zara or Coast.
You're happy with it.
And for me, I'm not, I always say to people, take away all your material possessions, you'll see the true value of a person.
Amen.
So if you're the person that has to only see your value through material things and you take them away and you're saying that you have no value, then what does that say about you or the people that are attracted to you? They're following you because of the things that you have and not necessarily what value that you're bringing to the table. So for me, at a young age, when my son was saying, he wants all these new toys, I said, that's great, but guess what are you going to do with all the toys you got upstairs? So he was like, I'll just throw them in the bin. So I gave him this look and he was like, oh, okay, Mummy's not happy with that answer. Recycling? He said recycling? Shall I put it in the recycling? I says, dude, come on now. So I said, you know what? You sell or donate them to charity. It's plastic. You can't recycle them toys. So his school had this school fete. And they said, if any family or children want to have a stall, it's £5, £5 stall. So I says, sell your stuff. So I said, you want to have a stall? So he was like, yeah, and he's pricing up all his stuff, £2, 50p, 25p, putting his price. And he was the only child in the middle of the field. I got this picture, it's somewhere on my Instagram. And he's sitting there at, I think it was 6 years of age, selling, he made £60.
Wow.
And I remember he was there for like 45 minutes and family were there and there was like bouncing castles and food and music and it's his school fete and he was like, I'm bored now, like sitting, he's a child, 6, don't want to sit there all day. So he called his 2 cousins over and he's like, got a job for you, £5, you watch my stall for the rest of the day. But I'll pay you £5 once you made the money and sold all the stuff. He went off to play. So the end of the day comes and and then they both, and then, I was laughing because I was saying that he was listening and watching me when I deal with my clients. Because he'd see me on my coaching calls, having these conversations and things like that. And I would take him along to certain of my meetings and certain of my events as well. Especially if I had to stay overnight in a hotel, I'd bring him along as well. And he's sitting in the back of the room and he's on his iPad, but he's there listening and soaking in the information. And the end of the day he came and they says, can we have our £5, please? So he handed over the £5 and I was like, well, what about my £5? He said, watch my stall, I will give you £5. I didn't say £5 each. And I was like, this guy.
He's a corporate.
And so straight away now, I says, I see now he's interested in entrepreneurship, but I wanted to teach him the value of money. I take him to the food drives, I take him to feed the homeless, I take him to see all these things. When you're walking past someone, Mum, why is that person sitting on the street, don't have a house, and explaining, sometimes people can go through challenges in life, and, you could be 1 or 2 paychecks away from being homeless. So you need to think about as well for yourself from a young age to value and appreciate the things that you have.
Yeah.
But I also teach him that actually you can have abundance, you can have wealth, you can have a good lifestyle.
Yes.
Because I expose him to that lifestyle. He gets to travel abroad, we go abroad every year pre-pandemic. He went to the Caribbean 4 times in the space of before he was like 7. Yeah. And then he's turned around and says, "Oh, another trip to the Caribbean, can't we go to Spain?" I'm like, you're lucky.
Yeah.
Go to stay in a hotel. Oh, where's the living room? Oh, because you're used to sweet life.
Yeah.
So he sees that,
Literally.
but I explained to him, this is hard work. This is, you've got to budget. You have to understand that not everything you can buy. And I always, he'll go out, he says, "I want this, trainers, I want this." And I'll say, "When's the last time you see me buying clothes for myself or trainers?" So we do a spring, summer, autumn, winter.
Yeah.
Outside of school clothes. Yeah. He gets like October, they go new wardrobe and we get rid of the old stuff. And spring, summer, new wardrobe. Not every day you're out in town seeing stuff and,
I want that.
Yeah, and he's 11, he's 12 now and he's looking and says, "I want Trap Star, I want this." No.
Trap Star,
First and foremost, they don't do kids' clothes. And even if they did, he got a cap and that was about it for his birthday. Yeah. And I says, at the end of the day, you have to budget for these things.
Yes.
So he understands the value and he appreciates it, and, he has to earn money for doing jobs and tasks around the house and things like that. So
Nah, that's amazing, man. That's probably the best education I've heard a parent give their child. That's amazing. Even the fact that he's there in the sessions you're going to, it's no longer just you speaking at him. And I thought that's an issue sometimes with kids. They feel as if you're just, I don't want to say telling off, but just talking at them about something. Whereas when they hear you maybe advising somebody else, they can still pick it up.
But also when things happen and they see something, they then appreciate it. So if we go away, I explain to him, I says, the reason why we get to go to the Caribbean is because Mummy had to do this, this and this. And when we couldn't get this, this and this, it was because it was to allow us to have this.
Yeah, so you're open about it.
Now I understand. Yeah, I tell him, if we're not going to get it, it's not going to happen.
That's amazing. So let's talk a bit about the personal branding stuff as well now. So a profitable personal brand, what does that look like to you?
So ultimately, a profitable personal brand is you as the go-to expert, and you're being able to monetize that.
Right.
And also as well, once you've built a successful personal brand, people will seek you out. You don't have to go and do the seeking. Yeah. So, like on Instagram now, you'll have a lot of people message you saying, "Oh, do you want to be featured in this magazine as the top 100 entrepreneurs to watch," or whatever. And they want you to pay a fee to be on this kind of list.
PR stuff.
And people are all posting, "Oh, I was in the top 10, but you paid for that PR."
I only learned that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, I got an email, just like you're saying, PR company, if you pay this amount, we can get you in, I don't know what's like, eight publications or something.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
And they were like, Yahoo Finance, I'm like, my audience don't read Yahoo Finance. But because a lot of these people are trying to build their personal brands, but may not have the blueprint of how to do it, they're thinking, okay, if I get some press, even if I pay for it, it's going to make me seem credible. Yeah. Because part of building a personal brand is credibility.
Got you.
So, for me, I can talk about the years experience I've got. I can talk about the qualifications I've gained. You can Google me. And it's about your digital footprint as well. Because when someone's going to want to work with you, for example, somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn. I hardly use LinkedIn. I'm going to actually try and get more into LinkedIn. And they were from a big international global company, and they were like, "We need someone to come and talk about personal branding. Okay. Please don't be offended. All I did is go onto LinkedIn and type in personal brand, and you were in the top 10. So I looked your face, I clicked on it, I read your bio, seen that you were credible, you know what you're talking about, did a Google, want to have a Zoom, and that was a 4-figure speaking engagement. Damn. So, it's about building a brand where people can seek you out and that you're consistent across all
broad,
platforms, because this is when I talk about authenticity. Like, a lot of people build their personal brand and jump on whatever the new wave is. So whether it's about making 6 figures in 6 days, or becoming a 7-figure expert. Like, we went through a phase, I'd say 5 years ago, when everybody was a mentor or a coach. Yeah. And that was the thing to begin. I'm a coach, I'm a coach, I'm a coach. But actually, what qualifies you by experience and or expertise to do what you do?
Right.
So these are the questions that people need to be asking themselves. If you want to build a profitable brand, you have to be credible.
Yes.
You have to know your stuff. And when I say being an expert, that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, if you was a surgeon and I needed to go and get surgery, I would want to know you've had X amount of experience, you've got these qualifications, degree, you studied,
no,
you've
exactly.
got,
Yeah.
But for example, to give advice on business support or, I don't know, Instagram, for example, you don't need to be an expert to that degree, but you should know more than everybody else in the average room of people.
Yeah. I fully agree with you, because when I started to even CK Talks Money, I come from a very regulated, heavily regulated background.
Yeah.
So financial industry, you can't even, you can barely speak without letting someone know this is my qualification. By the way, FCA regulation, boom, boom, boom. So when I found this space on social media and there's loads of people saying, my first thought was, are people allowed to say these things?
Yeah.
You know, and it's a bit crazy, because whether you like it or not, even if you have 1,000, 2,000 followers, there's going to be people listening who are going to take your
advice.
word.
Yeah.
So really, there needs to be, so when you're talking about credibility, there needs to be something that, you know, puts that together. And maybe that might be
definitely
online. And
so part of that is, okay, how can you build your credibility? Testimonials.
Yes.
So who have you helped?
Yes.
So to build a business as an expert, you either have to have got results for yourself in what you're teaching, or can demonstrate you've got the results for others.
Somebody else.
So if I says to you, if you came to me and says, Justice, I can help you grow your Instagram following to 10,000.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've got 1,000 followers, and I've got 4,500. Yeah. So for me, it's like, okay, well, help me to understand. Yeah, but then you then show me, guess what? I don't focus on building my profile, but guess what? Here's one I've took from 1,000 to 50,000. Here's one who's got 1 million. You can demonstrate those results. So first of all, I always say the proof is in the pudding. So have you got the results for yourself or someone else? What sets you apart from your competition? Or what is your experience? So sometimes you go for a lived experience and now you're teaching others, how did you overcome that challenge? How did you navigate whatever it is? But when it comes to certain industries, you do have to be careful. You see, the coaching industry is unregulated in the UK. So you'll have like different associations and institutes, but you do not have to actually be, so like, you know, you have to be like a chartered accountant or join certain, for certain professions. You don't necessarily have that regulations in the coaching. So people can make all these big, wild claims and no one's going to check them.
Got you.
Yeah. And I don't mean like check the claims, but check that person. Check you. Yeah, like you can't be doing this because there's no one there to hold you accountable. So one thing that I definitely do, because sometimes my advice can veer into finance or legal.
Got you.
I'm not legally qualified and I'm not financially qualified. So for example, I'll have a podcast episode coming out talking about the tips about registering a trademark.
Okay.
I'm going to talk you through my experience of how I went and got my trademark registered without paying for a trademark lawyer.
Oh, right.
But I'm not going to tell you how you can do it because I'm not a trademark lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can't give you the advice.
It's not advice.
And then I give you that advice and you say, Justice, I spent all these thousands of pounds and they rejected me.
Yeah.
And then now I'm held accountable. So I always have to put disclaimers out as well. So I'm saying in this episode, I'm sharing you this advice for educational purposes only.
Yeah.
This does not substitute financial advice. I am not qualified to give you financial or legal advice.
Yeah.
So I protect myself. And also as well on my websites or anywhere else, I have those disclaimers.
Definitely.
And that a lot of people, especially if you're going to take financial advice, you want somebody who actually is regulated and is certified when it comes to certain things.
And I think that's very key, because I remember even speaking to someone saying, someone said that it was something about contractors and mortgage, and they said that, no, if I'm a contractor, I got told I couldn't get a mortgage. I was like, who told you that?
Yeah.
Like,
and then they took that advice and ran with it, and in their head they're sitting there and they could have got a mortgage, but they're
you know. And this is the thing. So we talk as that whole credibility thing. It's really hard, I would say, though, in our current social media era, because we were having a quick discussion earlier, and I was saying that someone could sit in a Rolls Royce every day. They could, dress good, have a nice office, make great content. So online, they look like that person. They could make a website. They could be that person on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. and the company might approach them to do something.
Yeah.
You know?
And this is a thing, but you also have to realise that a lot of companies and corporates, unless they're looking for a social media influencer, they're looking beyond the social. Wow, and I think now it's easier to check somebody's credentials because you've got a digital footprint. Everything that you put onto the internet, whether you want to delete it or remove it afterwards, is cached and it's there. So now you can go back and read an article from 2009 that I was in 2006. So you can actually follow the thread of my story and know that I didn't just come up, as my mum said, what day, I never just come here, what day. You know, there's a long...
I saw the Levi's thing as well that you did.
So you're doing research and you know that I did a Levi's campaign and that was all about mentoring women around social change and enterprise. That was in 2012. They paid me, 10 years, you know, I think it was like $7,000 to attend 2 events and put out some content each week. And I just had my son. I actually turned it down at first because I was not 8 months pregnant at the time, and I was like, I'm just about to have a baby. I hadn't got the time to do all this stuff. And this is my first experience of working online. This was 2010, and they jumped on the call from San Francisco, and they were like, my worst American accent, hey, what are you talking about, man? Women have babies all the time. Like, come with the program. And they said, you know what? We don't want to even offend you and offer you this as a fee, so we just call it expenses. So for them, it wasn't even considered to be like a worthwhile. It's a big global iconic brand. They paid for me to go to London to bring my son, but that was a great experience. So I think credibility in personal branding is beyond social media. Social media is just a part of your personal brand. Think about getting into the press, speaking engagements. Also, you know, how do you position yourself as an expert? Can you organise your own events that people come to, and then get those testimonials, get those case studies where people can actually see that social proof.
Got you. And how would you... Okay, I'm a business owner, startup. Just started a business yesterday. What advice would you give me in regards to branding from day one? What would you say to me?
The first thing that you have to do before you even think about is branding is understand who your audience is, because this will affect your branding. And what is it that you have to offer? All right. So straight away, those two things are going to be paramount. If my audience is senior executives or CEOs of what they would say, you know, the top 500 or Fortune 500 companies who want to, I don't know, have wealth management advice, I'm not going to be necessarily marketing to them in my local community or putting flyers up in the community centre or even how I present myself. They have a certain expectation.
Of course,
you know, for that industry. So also you've got to think about when it comes to your brand, it's beyond the colours and it's beyond the logo. And a lot of people get caught up with this, like the logo, the colours, the website. I've built a successful personal brand where in fact for the last 10 years I haven't had a website.
Wow. You
can go to justicewilliams.co.uk. There is no website.
So if you see it, it's fake. Right? It's fake.
So, you know, I haven't had a website because I built a successful personal brand that people seek me out. I don't have to go and ask for press coverage. I've never paid for PR. I've never paid for press. And I always I've never asked to speak at an event. You know, I remember even applying to get a ticket for a TEDx and they then said they didn't respond. And then a week later, they was like, sorry, we couldn't get back to you. We want you to be one of our speakers. And that's when I did my first TEDx talk in 2013. So it's things like that. So for me, I would say when it comes to your branding, think about what message you want your branding to convey. Think about your brand values and they have to align with what you say across the board and the consistency of your brand. And if it comes to personal branding, again, what do you want to be known for? And when it talks about brand values, what do you stand for and what do you stand against? It's not just about the business side of things. So for me, I'm super passionate about eradicating child poverty because we have the highest rate of child poverty, you know, again, in Western Europe. Birmingham, at the moment, I'm sure it's 2/3 of children are living below the poverty line. You know, it's shocking statistics, but entrepreneurship and empowering parents through entrepreneurship can also be a route out of poverty.
Of course,
teaching financial education, budgeting and all these other stuff can also help empower parents. So for me, I'm really passionate about that. And I always during the conversation speak about that, donate 10% of my profits to work around that and also donate 4 weeks of my time every year to actually working on projects that help young people from low income backgrounds. So when you're building your personal brand, think about what you stand for and what you stand against and be consistent with it. So don't be jumping from one thing to another because it's oh, Black Lives Matter, so let me start jumping on the Black
Everyone's
Lives
doing
Matter.
it, so
because
I'm gonna
everyone's
pounce
doing
on
it,
it,
I'm going to
yeah.
be on it. Or, okay, right, I'm really passionate and advocate about LGBTQ. But then, okay, actually now, you know, the poor starving children in Africa. Oh, actually now I'm really passionate about women's rights and women equality.
And what you're saying is what literally we see on social media day by day. Whatever is hot, people tend to
jump on the wave.
Do a post about it, make a reel about it, and now it's all of a sudden important to you. And that's why the whole BLM movement, the whole Black Lives Matter movement, I say this all the time, but when everyone was posting it, I wasn't one of them. And the reason I wasn't was because I already know this is important to me. This isn't something that I started talking about because of the recent events. This is something I've always been on or been for. And I felt as if a lot of publications said something about it just so they wouldn't look like they didn't care.
Definitely.
Because they care.
Of course, because also it's that social media peer pressure because everybody else is doing it and you don't want to be cancelled or called out.
Exactly.
Because I do a lot of work with black owned businesses as well. And again, it's like something that's very passionate and are close to me in terms of what I want to do. So again, like you said, you've got to be consistent with it.
Exactly.
And it's got to also be, just because there's not a social media or press opportunity, you should be doing the work anyway.
And how important would you say branding is to how a business performs financially, if you think it's important?
It depends.
Is there a correlation, would you say?
It depends. Okay. So, for example, supply and demand. Mm-hmm. If I'm in an area and I'm selling a product, imagine it's just toilet paper. Okay. Because we knew about toilet paper going crazy in the pandemic, The first thing people know, there's a pandemic, I might not be able to wipe my behind.
Let me go get water and toilet paper.
Exactly. So imagine now I was in a village, right? And I'm the only one in that village that supplies toilet paper. I could just be at my house and say, I got a shipment coming in of toilet paper.
Literally.
I don't need to market. I don't need to do no branding. I don't need no website.
There's a demand for it.
There's a demand for it. So I can be very financially successful. There are many millions of businesses that are successful without having a visible brand.
Got you.
But a bad brand, or a negative perception of your brand can hurt you. Okay. So if you're somebody who's built up a really successful brand, for example, let's take Richard Branson. Go on to Virgin's social media, Instagram, he's got a couple 100,000. Go on to Richard Branson's Instagram, he's got over 1 million followers, because people pay attention to the person behind the brand.
Exactly.
Now, if Richard Branson started investing in some dodgy stuff, whatever it may be, I don't know, firearms or nuclear bombs or whatever, people are like, oh, I'm not flying with Virgin. This is they're causing all this war in the world and doing all these things. So that's like a negative perception of a brand.
Exactly.
So I would say that you can still be, there's lots of people who are very successful. If you judge my social media on my success compared to someone who's got 50,000 followers, you may say that I'm not successful. But the reason why you may not even see me post every day is because I don't need to. I'm busy. I'm booked and busy. A lot of my work has come from word of mouth and building a brand where people seek me out. I don't need to advertise.
It's like a real life brand, rather than just a social media presence.
So like early in the year, June, I was supposed to put out 2 coaching programs this year, and I made the decision based on the work that I already had booked up until the end of the year that I wasn't going to do it because I don't have the time. I've got enough business coming in. So I decided, you know what, let's save that for 2023. So you can't judge an outward perception of, you know, how good somebody's doing in business, but if it's negative stuff that's been put out about your brand, that can make a dent in your financial
that makes
margins.
Sense. No, that's great. And keeping a consistently good brand, what tips would you give to someone?
Be honest.
Okay.
Be open. Right. If you get things wrong, put those hands up and just take it on the chin. So it's like me sitting here and saying to you, oh, you know, my business has been great. I've made multi-millions of pounds, which I haven't, you know, and, you know, everything was perfect and I'm so successful because I'm so amazing. But I'm not sure in those true stories. And I says, hold on, weren't you that girl that ran her from the office? And, and you didn't pay your rent.
People start doing research.
And you're not being authentic in terms of your branding. Share those stories, share those failures. Those lessons is what people want to hear.
It's true.
They don't want to hear that glossy thing like, oh, you know, what they call your highlight reel. They want to hear those. Yes, some people are going to be like cheering for those downfalls, but your real audience, they're going to be like, wow, there's me thinking I was the only one that had gone through that, or
But
I
he's
had
been through it,
one
she's
point
been
had
through
bad
it too.
credit, and then
Yeah.
I could turn it around, or was
Yeah.
this much in debt, or lost this and built it all over again, because
Yeah.
you have to just be unapologetic about it, because life is a journey. Success is not a destination. You will have highs and lows.
Yeah.
Not everything is going to be smooth sailing. So if you want to build a good brand, be authentic, be open, be honest, but share as much as you're willing to share. You don't have to share your whole life story or things that may trigger trauma or things like that. But if you know that this is part of your brand story, then share it.
Don't
Because
hide it,
because science shows that people connect more with brands through their brand story. They don't want to know necessarily the chronological, oh, this company was started by my great granddad in 1883.
History.
They want to know the why. Why are you doing what you do, Justice? You know, what then sets me apart from me being a coach and somebody else being a coach is going to be my journey, my brand story.
No, definitely.
We could be offering the exact same service. You can't duplicate me.
Exactly.
And that's where a lot of people try and jump the fence, because I think like I need to be doing what he's doing or what she's doing or what that person's
When your
doing.
story is unique to who
To
you
you.
are.
So I think just be consistent, be open and honest. When you make mistakes, don't be afraid to share those mistakes, because people want to humanize your brand.
Got you.
People want to connect with humans.
Yeah.
So if you're building a brand, even if it's a business brand that's separate to your personal brand, still have that human connection, that brand story. That's really, really important. And that's what I said, just be open, honest and authentic, really.
No, amazing. And for people struggling with branding, let's say they've already started, they thought they've heard this now and they're like, boy, I thought I had a brand. Justice has just made me realise my thing's not the one. What advice would you give them?
I would say the first thing that you want to do is give your brand an audit. So there's a few tips you can do. First and foremost, every 6 months, Google yourself.
Cool.
Yeah.
Or would you do it for other people to audit?
Yeah. So I do personal
Yes, you
brand
can-
audits,
Nice.
and I do personal brand strategies. I do a whole 90-day branding accelerator package where we can help build your brand from the ground up. We can do your press PR, podcast production, social media, the whole full shebang.
Yeah.
But if you just want to get you started yourself, go Google yourself. When you Google yourself, what do you see on the first 2 pages of Google? Is that a true representation of what you want your brand to represent? So when I said to you, when I was 21, 20 years ago, and I went to prison, and you said, oh, that touched me. You didn't know that.
Yeah.
Did you know that, or did you know that?
I only knew because when I looked you up and the YouTube video came up, it said something like from prison to
I think it was HMP to MBE or something like that.
And I was thinking, I watched the video and it didn't come up, and I was like, maybe that's just something else. I don't know.
But you didn't know from knowing me on social media or whatever else.
I would never have known that.
So there you go. So if you Google, a lot of the stuff now has been pushed down because my brand has moved forward and in a different space now.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when you Google yourself, you need to say, is that's what represents my brand today?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, you need to do something about it. Then another thing is as well, if you've got a social media profile and you're building an audience on social media, ask your audience. Instagram, do polls and stickers. If somebody was to ask you, what do I do? What would you say in 3 words or less?
That's a big question, boy.
Yeah. And I do that every couple of years.
I might do that today.
Yeah. And then you'll see when you get all those responses, you want to know, is the content that I'm putting out there aligned with my brand? Or am I actually missing the market? Do I need to come up with a new content strategy?
Exactly.
So I've done that on Facebook, and people would say, inspirational speaker, motivational business coach, supporting women, female empowerment, entrepreneurship, business coach, speaker. So I thought, okay, right, I'm in
there. There's a common trend.
There's a common trend in what I do. So that's another thing that you can do. And then another thing is kind of like review your brand foundations, like in terms of what you're offering, your services, does that align with your brand and what you want to do? Or do you need to kind of revisit and review that? And in terms of your area of expertise and what you're known for, are you still known for that? So the BBC will still reach out to me when there's a story around young people and say, oh, Justice, want to interview about this issue with young people. I'm saying that was 10, 15 years ago. I don't work with young people anymore. But because they've got me on a contact schedule or whatever, they'll contact me. But I don't do that work anymore. And then I'll just say, oh, this is another person who's doing the work, who you can talk to. So again, those are the things that you need to kind of be mindful of.
No, that's amazing, man. And I feel like I know the answer to this, but are you doing what you love?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's more stuff that I want to do that I love, but for now, I'm doing what I love. And I know that when I'm 50, which I can't believe is in 9 years, well, actually, nearly 8 years, because I'm going to be my birthday in November this year.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But I know that there's things that I want to do, like I want to write. I want to write books, not just business books. I want to write fiction.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I grew up as a bookworm and writing stories. Like book was my escapism as a child because we didn't have all these flash toys and trips and stuff.
Course,
But my mum would always give me money to buy books at the book fair at school, and and my dad used to say for us to have a social outing, go to the library.
Or library, yeah.
So on a Saturday we was in the local library for a few hours,
yeah.
and we'd read books. So books was always my thing. So I want to write, but I also want to like follow in my dad's footsteps and get more into property.
Amazing.
So I am involved in the family business, but it is in St. Kitts in the Caribbean.
Okay.
And we've got apartments which we rent to international students. Okay. So we've got an apartment building that we own.
Oh, nice.
We rent to international students. But my dream is to have a high-end boutique bed and breakfast by the beach, on the beach.
Nice. And people talk a lot about not chasing the money, follow your passion, do the work, the money will come. Do you fully agree with that, or would you say there's an element that has to still be motivated by the money in itself, would you say?
I would say don't chase the money, but follow the money.
Okay. Go where the money's at.
Yeah, so
Cool.
follow the money. So at the end of the day, passion cannot pay the bills. You know, my saying, after I did that 1 year of going around speaking, I says, Justice, I had a frank conversation with myself. Because my son will say, Mum, are you mad? Why are you always talking to them? Because I talk to myself. And I like be doing work. I said, right, okay, that doesn't make no sense. And I say, Justice, inspiration doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
So the reality of it is we still need money. And while a lot of people say money doesn't buy happiness, and it doesn't physically buy happiness, because I know people who are wealthy and still feel empty inside. But money can buy peace of mind. Exactly. When the bailiffs are not knocking at the door. That can be viewed as happiness.
Exactly.
When you now have the opportunity to be able to go to your children's school plays and assemblies and not have to be in the 9 to 5 rat race or working with clients or at work, when you can afford to go to the shop and not have to calculate, can I get the bread and the milk, or do I need to think before I get to the till?
Just freely, just
and when you can go to the cash point and think, I don't want to see the balance just in case there's not, let's just hope £10 comes out. The reality of it is you're still going to need money. And even if you're a person that focuses on doing good in the world, you still need money to do good, or you need somebody else's money. So the reality of it is, for me, it's a case of, well, actually, the more money I have, the more people I can help.
Right.
Not just my family and my friends, but if I want to do good in the world, unless I'm going to have the time to kind of leverage and advocate for other people to give me money, the easiest thing that I can do is make my own money and then create my own opportunities that will then give opportunities to other people.
Got you. And how important would you say money is to you? On a scale of 1 to 10.
7.
Okay.
I would say money is not the be end and end all. If I was making a lot of money, so if someone offered me, I don't know, £250,000 salary to work a job that I really, really hated, I wouldn't take the money.
Right.
Or I would strategically, like you said, a project management in me will say, okay, what will this do for me 12 months from now? I'll do it for a year. I'll sign a permanent contract. I'll do it for a year. I'll make sure I know when I have to give my notice, and then I'll use that money and leverage it for something else as a stepping stone. A lot of people, when they go into business and things don't work out, they're still struggling and trying to have this facade like things are great. But the reality is, don't ever be ashamed to go back to the 9 to 5 or to build your business as a side hustle while you're working to 9 to 5. And if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, you can still build a personal brand within the workplace. Which makes you stand out from your other peers, which allows you to go get pay rises or to get a better job at another company with better benefits, better opportunity, or better pay package. So not everyone, people will see like working a 9 to 5 is like the poor relatives version of making money. Well, no, because not everybody's built for entrepreneurship, and not everybody's built to be an employee, and we still need people to work to make this country run.
We can't be CEOs
exactly.
Can't be everybody.
So I would say money is definitely important, especially having kids. If anything happens to me, I want to make sure that they're okay. But I think that, every person, especially who's a parent or a carer, should be striving to leave their children better off than how they grew up. So I know that my dad has already created generational wealth for all his children.
He's done well, yeah.
And he's still building and working, and he's in his 60s. And he's still going, he's still got business opportunities, he's still thinking of other things to bring. And he's not doing it for himself. He's not living no lavish lifestyle, but he's comfortable and he's in the Caribbean, he's living good life. Now, for me, I hear a lot of parents or people say, boy, you know, when you turn 16 or 18, you need to go and learn. Go out there yourself and learn the hard way. But I thought the whole purpose was to allow the children to have an easier life, but also it has to come with a balance, because some of these children are, you know, even my own children sometimes act spoiled and privileged, and privilege can come from having money and knowing that actually if I want to go and order delivery tonight, we can have takeaway 5 days a week if I wanted to. Exactly. So it has to be a balance for me. So money is very important. Now having children, it wasn't so important, say, when I was doing all my community work. But now I want to make sure that the children don't go without. I don't want them to suffer from my poor financial decision making.
That is amazing. Justice, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You've given so much insight, so much knowledge.
You need to come back to Birmingham. There's so many amazing people in this city that you can interview.
We found a good one, guys. My London people, we found a good one, you know. Justice, where can we find you?
Yeah, online, so the best place to find me and connect with me at the moment is Instagram. Okay. So if you need any advice around personal branding, a brand audit, and depending on when this episode is out, there'll be stuff that you can download. Just click the link in my bio or shoot me a DM. This is the time when I give you permission to slide into my DMs. Slide in. And I'll be more than happy to help you. Nice. And I'm also launching a podcast, so hopefully that will be out as well. Dream Plan Launch, the podcast. Nice. So that's going to be an online resource. I'm building that so that I can give out a lot of these gems and this knowledge, this advice for free.
Yes.
For people that need it.
Amazing. Guys, you heard it here first. Justice Williams, your boy CK Talks Money. Thanks for listening in. Check the links in the bottom and watch out for the next episode.
Thank you.
Peace.